All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going deep on how people get rich, like really rich.
I'm excited to dive
We're
in.
talking about fortunes, the kind that lands you on the Forbes list, and our guide for this deep dive.
Author names How People Get Rich Now. It's a fascinating analysis of how wealth creation has changed over time.
Exactly. And, I got to say, this piece really flips the script on some common assumptions about wealth.
Yeah, it challenges the traditional narrative, like the whole idea that 1982 was the peak of American wealth creation. The author argues that might be a total anomaly.
1982, an anomaly. Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. Why is 1982 such a weird year in the history of getting rich?
Well, think about it. 1982, it's the decade of shoulder pads, big hair, and apparently massive inheritances.
Oh, yeah, I remember those shoulder pads. But inheritances.
Yeah, inheritances. 60 of the top 100 richest Americans in 1982, they inherited their fortunes.
Seriously, 60 out of 100.
Yep, you had like 10 DuPont heirs on the list alone.
10 DuPonts. It was like a family reunion for old money up there.
Exactly, but here's the thing, that was unusual. By 2020, inheritance plummets to just 27% of the top 100.
So what happened? Did everyone suddenly get super generous and start donating their millions?
Not quite. What we see is this massive rise in entrepreneurship. People starting companies, investing in the market. That becomes the dominant path to wealth.
Ah, the entrepreneurial spirit. So less silver spoons, more bootstraps.
Exactly, and technology plays a huge role in this shift.
Ah, so you're saying instead of inheriting grandpa's oil wells, today's mega rich are coding their way to billions.
It's not just about coding, although that's definitely part of it. It's about how technology has lowered the barriers to starting a company. It's easier than ever to reach a global market, build a product, and scale your business.
So you don't need to build a giant factory or a railroad to make $1 billion anymore. That's kind of mind-blowing.
Right. Think about those old school fortunes built on oil and real estate. They dominated the list in 1982.
Yeah, oil tycoons, real estate moguls, the classic images of wealth.
But by 2020, they're practically a footnote.
So who took their place at the top? Spill the tea.
The author says about 30 of the 73 new fortunes in 2020 came from what he calls tech companies.
Tech companies, huh? Well, that makes sense. But honestly, I'm a little skeptical. Is Amazon really a tech company? Or is it just a really good retailer that uses the internet?
That's a good question, and the author addresses it head on. Yes, companies like Amazon operate in traditional industries, but their core innovation, their competitive advantage, it all comes from technology. They're disrupting these sectors in ways that traditional companies can't even fathom.
So it's not just about using technology. It's about technology being the core of their success, the engine driving everything.
Exactly. They're not just using technology, they're creating it, they're living and breathing it.
That makes sense. But this whole tech-driven wealth creation thing, is it really a new phenomenon? Didn't we have those self-made millionaires back in the late 1800s, the robber barons and all that?
You're thinking of the New York Herald Tribune list from 1892, and you're right, it actually looks a lot like the 2020 Forbes list. Stardoms were driving wealth creation back then, too.
Wow, so history really does repeat itself.
It does, sometimes in surprising ways. But here's the thing. There was this big gap between 1892 and the mid-20th century where it became really difficult to start a successful company.
What happened? Did everyone lose their entrepreneurial spirit?
Not exactly. We saw massive corporate consolidation. Think JP Morgan merging companies left and right.
The rise of the corporate giants. It was like that frozen pond analogy the author uses.
Exactly. Starting a company was like trying to break through this thick ice. You could only really make it around the edges in those tiny niche markets.
But technology, it's like a giant icebreaker, isn't it?
That's a great way to put. Technology is thawing that frozen pond, allowing startups to punch through in all sorts of industries, disrupting the old guard and creating massive value. It's a pretty exciting time to be an entrepreneur.
Okay, I'm officially pumped, but hold on, before we get too carried away, let's break down exactly why starting a company is supposedly easier than ever. Give us the details.
Sounds good. Let's jump right in. So let's get down to brass tacks. Why is starting a company easier than ever?
Yeah, let's unpack that.
First off, technology has made it ridiculously cheap to build products.
Okay, that makes sense. Software, websites, apps, those are all relatively cheap to create compared to, like, building a factory.
Exactly. And it's not just about the initial costs, it's about reaching customers too.
You mean marketing and all that?
Exactly. Think about it. A few decades ago, you needed TV commercials, billboards, print ads, the whole shebang.
Yeah, expensive stuff.
Now, with social media, online advertising, content marketing, you can reach millions of people with a fraction of the cost.
Wow, that's a game changer.
It totally is. And then there's the whole scaling thing.
Scaling.
Yeah, growing your business, expanding into new markets.
Right, right.
Cloud computing, e-commerce platforms, online payment systems, all this stuff makes it so much easier and cheaper to scale your business than it used to be.
So basically, technology has removed a ton of the friction that used to exist in starting and growing a company.
Precisely. And that's not even the whole story. There's also this shift in the balance of power between founders and investors.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, back in the day, if you wanted to start a company, you needed a ton of upfront capital.
Yeah, you had to go hat in hand to the banks, beg for loans, hope they wouldn't laugh you out of the room.
Exactly. And that meant giving up a lot of control. You'd end up with investors dictating terms, taking huge chunks of equity.
So the founders were kind of at the mercy of the money people?
Exactly. But now, with lower startup costs and this abundance of venture capital, founders have a lot more leverage.
So they can get better deals, hold on to more of their company.
Exactly. And that translates into more wealth for the founders if their company takes off.
It's like the whole power dynamic is flipped.
It really has. And all of this, the lower cost, the easier scaling, the better terms for founders, it leads to this explosion of successful startups.
It's like a perfect storm for entrepreneurial success.
It really is. And it's happening across all sorts of industries.
So it's not just tech companies anymore.
Nope, it's everything. You've got innovative startups disrupting healthcare, education, finance, even agriculture.
Wow, so the frozen pond is really melting everywhere.
It is, and this is where things get really interesting. The author argues that this is not just a blip, it's a fundamental shift in how wealth is created.
So it's not just about tech companies, it's about this broader trend of entrepreneurship as the dominant path to wealth.
Exactly, and that brings us to another really interesting point. The speed at which companies are reaching these crazy valuations, it's insane.
Yeah, he talks about how companies used to take decades to hit a billion-dollar valuation. He uses IBM, HP, and Microsoft as examples.
Right, but now we're seeing companies hit that milestone in just a few years.
Like those unicorn startups you hear about all the time.
Exactly. And that rapid growth combined with the lower initial costs means that young founders can achieve massive wealth in a ridiculously short amount of time.
So it's like the whole timeline of wealth creation has been compressed.
It totally has. And that has huge implications for society as a whole. But before we dive into all that, let's talk about some specific examples.
Yes, give us the names, the stories, the juicy details.
All right, buckle up because we're about to meet the titans of the tech world.
All right, so we've explored how technology is shaking up wealth creation, getting it easier to start companies, reach customers, and scale like crazy. But let's be honest, it's not all sunshine and roses, right? There's got to be a flip side to all this disruption.
Oh, absolutely. Every revolution has its growing pains, and this tech-driven revolution is no exception.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the downsides? What are the potential pitfalls of this new wealth landscape?
Well, one major concern is that it could exacerbate inequality.
The whole rich get richer thing. But isn't that kind of baked into capitalism?
You're right, inequality is not exactly a new concept, but what's different now is the sheer speed and scale at which wealth is being generated. We're seeing companies reach valuations that were unheard of just a few decades ago, and that concentration of wealth at the very top, well, it's raising some eyebrows.
Okay, so inequality is a potential issue. What else? Any other downsides to this tech-driven model?
Another concern is the impact on traditional industries and jobs. Think about it. As tech companies disrupt sectors like retail, transportation, manufacturing, you're going to see job displacement.
So while some people are cashing in on the tech boom, others are losing their livelihoods.
It's a complex issue, no doubt. Some argue that those job losses are just part of the natural churn of capitalism, creative destruction, new jobs emerging to replace the old ones. But others worry that this transition won't be so smooth, and that we'll end up with a growing gap between the tech elite and everyone else.
It's like we're living in two different worlds, one where fortunes are made overnight, and another where people are struggling just to keep up.
That's a powerful image, and unfortunately, it reflects the reality for many. Which brings us to the question of, well, what can we do about it? How do we make sure everyone benefits from this tech-driven economy?
Yeah, how do we spread the wealth, so to speak?
Well, the author touches on the idea that if starting a company is easier than ever, then more people should be doing it. He seems to believe that entrepreneurship is a key part of the solution.
So if everyone's starting companies, everyone gets rich. Sounds a little too good to be true.
It's definitely not a magic bullet. I mean, not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. And even if you are, do you have access to the resources and support you need? Starting a company is still risky. Not everyone's comfortable with that.
So entrepreneurship's a path for some, but not a cure-all. What are some other ways to address these challenges?
There are a bunch of policy ideas out there. Investing in education and training programs, that's a big one. Helping workers adapt to the new demands of the job market.
Makes sense. We need to equip people with the skills for this new economy.
Exactly. And then there's things like tax breaks and incentives for small businesses, strengthening the social safety net, providing a cushion for those who are displaced by technological change.
So it's not just about individuals hustling harder, it's about creating a system that supports everyone.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance, fostering innovation while making sure everyone benefits. It's a conversation we need to be having as a society.
Well said. And it's a conversation we'll keep having on future episodes of the Deep Dive. But for now, let's give our listeners something to chew on.
Yes, let's wrap things up with a little food for thought.
We've talked about the incredible potential of technology to create wealth, but we've also seen the potential downsides: inequality, job displacement, all that good stuff. So what do you think, listeners? Are we headed towards a shiny tech utopia or a dystopian nightmare?
Tough question. There's no easy answer. But one thing's for sure, the future's not predetermined. It's up to us to shape it.
We're not just passengers on this tech train, we're the conductors.
Exactly. By engaging in these tough conversations, by challenging assumptions, by adapting and evolving, we can navigate these complex issues. We can build a future that works for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into how people get rich now. Hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little inspiring. Remember, the world's changing fast, but that also means there are more opportunities than ever before. So go out there, embrace the unknown, and make it happen.
And don't be afraid to ask for help along the way. There's a whole community of innovators, entrepreneurs, and changemakers out there ready to support you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.